afternoon, everyone. This is Pam Scott, Director of Client Services with Oasis Solutions, and I'd like to welcome everyone today to our Sage 100 just general tips and tricks webinar today. I wanted to do a little housekeeping at first to let you know that your line is muted during the presentation, but I will open it up to questions, and you can use the question feature in the GoToWebinar to enter your questions in. If I am unable to address all of the questions that come in, I will follow up after the webinar and will provide a response to all of the questions immediately following. Today's session is being recorded, and it should be available on our website probably within the next couple of days. So you can find any of our prior tips and tricks webinars on our website. So feel free to check those out or share the link with any of your team members. So with that, I will go ahead and get started. And today, instead of being module specific, it's more of a potpourri of various things within Sage that maybe we've talked about throughout the year, or some features that we haven't talked about before. So I'm going to kind of go through some of the modules, and then we will finish up at the end of the presentation talking a little bit about year-end and upgrades. So again, thank you for joining us, and we will go ahead and get started. The presentation today is in Sage 100 version 2018. So if you see anything that looks a little bit different, or a couple of the features that I'm going to show you are specifically related to the 2018 version, I'll try to point that out during the presentation. So the first thing that I want to show you is something very easy and very simple, but you will get to ask this question when you're looking to upgrade, when you're calling for support, when you're calling for year-end assistance, and we will be asking you what version of Sage you're running. So to find that, you're going to go in your Sage, and if you're on a much older version that it still says MAS 90 or MAS 200, you can still follow these steps to determine the version you're running. So you're going to click on Help, and you're going to go to About, and then it's going to show you what version you're running. So it's going to indicate whether you're on the standard, advanced, or premium version, and the exact version number. So you will see things because like the 2017 will show that it's the 5.4 version. So we'll want this exact information. This also indicates to us which service update or product update you're running, and that can be very important when troubleshooting error messages or looking to install product updates, year-end updates, and that type of thing. So I wanted to show everyone that. And then the other thing that I want to show you is up at the File, and then we're going to do Change User Settings. So in Change User Settings, there's a couple of things that I wanted to show you today. And one of those is the Default Report Preview Zoom. So what this allows is that when you are previewing reports, you can have it automatically zoom every time versus having to click on it each time you preview it. So if you click the down arrow, you can actually change that so that it projects in a much larger font and view when you're taking a look at it. So that's something that a lot of people do not recognize is there, and are really excited when they learn that you're able to do that. The other thing that I wanted to show you is this implied decimal point. So this now allows you to imply a decimal point so that if this box is checked and in an area in Sage I typed just 123, it is going to automatically assume that I mean $1.23. If I'm not implying the decimal point, and I type in 123, then it's going to assume that it's 123 versus 1.23. Now, the reference that I'm giving is 2 digits in the decimal point, but for those of you that are using inventory and some maybe various add-ons, you can expand the decimal places in some of your modules. So, but that is what the implied decimal point does. So I wanted just to point that out to you. And again, that was under File and User Settings. Okay. And all users should have access to this area. I believe you can possibly block it through their role maintenance, but more than likely everyone at this point in time would have access to that. So the next thing that I want to show you is we're going to go down to the Library Master module. We're going to go into the Setup and we're going to go into the System Configuration. And I want to show you a couple of features that have been added over the past couple of versions. And we're going to go to the Preferences tab. And we're going to take a look at the Enable Autocomplete and then the Enable Spell Check. So the Enable Autocomplete, what that does, if you have this box checked, and when we go into an accounts receivable in just a little bit, I'm going to actually show you how that works. But basically, when you're in like customer maintenance, vendor maintenance, you're in inventory maintenance with your either an item number or description. Once you start typing in that, let's say that customer name, anything that starts with those first few letters that you type in will pop up on a screen so that you can then just go down and click on the applicable customer to have it brought up. So you don't have to start typing, then do the lookup, or do the lookup and do customer name begins with, and start that. So it saves you several clicks in trying to do a customer lookup. So we'll show what that autocomplete looks like in just a few minutes. And then the Enable Autocomplete is available in the 2017 version as well as the 2018 version. The Enable Spell Check is only available in the 2018 version. But what it does is it carries this spell checking functionality through several modules and areas within Sage. It's not completely throughout the system, but we'll take a look a little bit later at how that works and how you can notice whether or not you have a word misspelled. But the spell check feature has been added to the memos. And so that memo would be any memo, like you have memos in General Ledger, Accounts Payable, Receivable, Inventory. So any of those memo fields has the spell check. Messages that you print on forms, such as invoices, statements, or checks. If you have messages printing, it will do that. In Paperless Office, the delivery windows. Comments. If you're putting comments on invoices or something of that nature, you can do spell check. Notes in customer contact maintenance or vendor contact maintenance. The test email message, if you're doing emailing directly out of Paperless Office, it will also check it there. And if you were using the Master Console, when you do the Master Console, which is this icon listed right here, it will show you who is actually in the system. And you have a broadcast feature down here, so you may use this if you need to reboot your server. So you want to notify all of your end users that they need to exit Sage within the next 5 minutes because you need to reboot the server. You can click on this broadcast button and then send them a message, and so it will spell check this also. And since we're in this screen, for those of you that may not be familiar with that functionality, there's also a feature to shut down all. And we really do not recommend that you use that feature because it could be that a user is in the middle of doing an update, or they're in the middle of something where you would not literally want to shut down Sage and kick them out of the system. So what most folks will do is they'll send a broadcast message. So anybody that is in Sage, it's going to pop up on their screen. Now, if they're away from their desk and at lunch, they're not going to know that they need to exit. But you can send them that message, and then you can keep refreshing your screen. And as users close their Sage instance, then all you should end up seeing is yourself, because you're the one that's in Master Console. If you have a user that maybe is at lunch and has not exited out, if someone can't go over to their workstation and close them out, you do have the option to highlight them and then click this little X and kind of kill their task. But again, you do want to be careful with that and just not arbitrarily kick folks out of the system. So, so those are the different areas where you can do spell checking. And again, the spell check feature is only available in the 2018 version, which is also known as 6.0. All right, and that pretty much covers what we were going to take a look at in the library master module. So what I'm going to do now is talk a little bit about Paperless Office. And the main thing that I want to make people aware of is that Paperless Office is now a part of Sage 100. It has not been an add-on that had to be purchased separately for a few years. And I still find that there are people that are not using Paperless Office. So you can still print your registers. You know, if you're one of those that wants to print that hard copy and go through it and make sure everything is okay before you do an update, you still have the option to do that, where you can save it to a PDF and print, or you can preview it and then just have it save it to the PDF. And then you can go back and review those PDFs at any point in the future. So you have the ability to save all of your journals and registers, your period end reports, areas within report maintenance and form maintenance, and then also you can email out of Paperless. So you can pick and choose which documents are emailed, and you can also pick and choose, let's say for instance, we'll talk about invoicing your customers. Let's say for instance you have some customers that will not accept an invoice via email. You have to physically mail them a copy of the invoice. You can pick and choose which customers are emailed, and then when you and then the others obviously is going to get a hard copy, so that when you go to print your invoices, it's going to do both at the same time. It knows which ones are to be emailed and it knows which ones are to be printed. So you can do things like email your invoices. You can email quotes out of sales order. You can email customer statements. So you kind of think about how much you're saving in labor, you know, the paper, the envelopes, the postage, if you're doing things electronically. In the purchase order module, you can email POs directly to your vendors. I still talk to folks that they physically print the purchase order, go and scan it, and then they manually email the PO to their vendor. So all of that can be done in basically one or two clicks of a button, and all managed within Sage instead of having to do things so manually. So if you're not using Paperless, if you feel like you're not using it as effectively as you can, you know, please get in touch with our support team, and they will be glad to work with you and get things set up so that it's functioning very effectively for you. So with that, I'm going to just very quickly take a look and see if there are any questions. And it does not appear that we have any questions at this point. So if you do think of something, go ahead and just drop those questions in. Okay. So now we're going to talk for a few minutes on the accounts receivable module. So some of the things that I wanted to show you in AR is the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go into customer maintenance. And I'm going to show you how to do a custom lookup. And even though I'm showing you this in accounts receivable, anywhere you have a lookup icon, which is this little magnifying glass within Sage, you can create your own custom lookup. So, so let me show you a couple of things as we get into this. The first thing I want to show you is that we talked earlier about the autocomplete. So let's say that I wanted to look up a customer that I know's name starts with Alan. Once I type in the letter A, you'll see that it brings up any customer that I have in my system, regardless of if I had them in multiple divisions. And it will bring up a list where I could then go in and just click Alan and hit my tab key, and it's going to bring that customer up. I can also, if I type ALL, the only thing that starts with that is Alan, and then I can select them. So what that keeps you from doing is clicking on this custom lookup and either finding it here, which I have very few customers in my demo data, but if I could have 400 customers that start with the letter A, so then I would have to do customer number begins with, begins with ALL, and then do a find. And it didn't find anything because I didn't put in the, because actually I picked number instead of name. So let's do this again. So then you'll find it this way. But as you can see, that autocomplete is much, much more efficient. But what I did want to show you is how you can customize these lookups. So I'm going to go back and click on my lookup icon. And the screen that I have here is basically the default lookup. And this is what everyone that uses Sage sees on their standard default lookup. But let's say that I want to see some additional information. So I'm going to click on Custom, and it's going to bring up a wizard where I can bring up, where I can set up a new lookup. So I'm going to put this description as customers by state. I'm not going to make it my default view, but I just want to make another custom view. So I'm going to hit my Enter key. I'm going to click Next. The items, the fields listed on the right are the ones that you're seeing up here. I can remove any of these. I can move the order in which they're listed, except the very first field. This field I cannot remove or change. And if you'll see the little asterisk beside it, basically means that it's a required field in the custom lookup. So let's say that I want to add the customer's address. So on the left side, these are all of the fields that I can actually bring in addition to additional databases. So I have all of these other data fields that I can bring in. But I'm going to just do a simple one today, and I want to add the client's information so that I can see what states my customers are located in. So what I can do is I can either double click the line, or I can highlight it and use this key and bring the information in. Let's assume that I never use address line 3, so I'm going to bring in the city and the state. And there's really nothing else that I think I want to keep at this time, but I want my address right after my customer's name. And so what I would do is I'm going to click this first field, and I'm going to use the up arrow icon and move that up. I'm going to move this up, and then I'm going to move the city up so that it's right above the zip code. Whoops. I'm going to move this down. There we go. So I'm going to click Next. I can put in a selection criteria. So I don't have enough data to do this adequately, but let's say that most of your customers are in Kentucky and Tennessee, and you wanted to just see a list of your Kentucky customers, or you just want to see them by division. You could say that you wanted the state to be equal to, and then you could type in KY. And then when it creates this lookup, it's only going to show you customers that are in Kentucky. So I'm not going to do anything with this. I'm going to go back one and then just go over. So at this point, I can click Next again. I can give it a different title if I want it to. I can have the default search column be on state versus the customer number. And then it also shows the default search option as begins with, but I could change that as well. I'm going to just leave these as they are for today's purposes and click Finish. And now you're going to notice that I still have my custom lookup, or excuse me, my standard lookup. But if I go down here to the view and I click my down arrow, now I have this additional view that I've created. And I'm going to click Customers by State. And now you can see it provides all of that information. So if I wanted to, obviously they're sorted in customer number order, and I can tell this by this little symbol. If I wanted to sort this list by state, I could click on the state header, and then it will resort my list for me. If I wanted to sort by, maybe your customer numbers are numeric and you wanted to sort it by the customer's name and have it be in alpha order, you can sort by this column. And now what you can do if you wanted to is you can actually export this data out to Excel. So you have an Excel icon down here at the bottom of your screen. So if I click on that, it is going to then open Excel, and it has exported that information out so that I can, manipulate or whatever I want to do with the data. But it brings it out to Excel. So sometimes people will use it for just very quick reports on, again, getting a mailing list, that they want to pull out of the system. Again, identifying your customers that are within a certain geographic area. So you can do all of those. So again, this is not a function that is just in customer maintenance. Anywhere you have the lookup, you have that ability. So if you're not utilizing that, that would be a great feature to use. So if anybody has any questions about that, if you will let me know. And what I want to do now is I want to briefly show you the memo features. And I'm going to show you how it works, make some suggestions on, kind of give some ideas on how other clients use this, and then also show you the spell check feature. So when you're in customer maintenance, vendor maintenance, inventory maintenance, item maintenance, the general ledger, your chart of accounts, you have a little memo button. And you'll notice how this one is yellow and highlighted. I'm going to just click through some of my customers, and you'll notice how this one is plain. That's my indication to know that this customer does not have any memos whatsoever listed on them. But if I go back and I look at this customer, I do see that they have a memo. And if I click on it, I can see that this particular customer has 4 different memos. And I'm going to give you, the spell is one that I use just to show you how the spell check works. But one of the things that that we utilize is that we track collections using the memos in Sage. So if you click on the memo code called collect, you can go in and you can add information or notes about those collection calls. Now I'm going to create a brand new one here for just a second. What we do, instead of having a code called collect, we put in the year, so that in the beginning of 2018, when if we make a collection call to a client, we actually call that 2018 and call it collection calls. And then it's going to default, the memo date's going to default to whatever the first time is you've used it. And then what we do is we just, in date order, put in notes for this client. Right, I'm going to, okay, see how these 2 words have a red underline? The reason for that is that the spell check feature is turned on, and obviously I've made some typos or I've typed in a word it doesn't recognize. So if I go to this first word and I do a right click on it, it's going to give me suggestions. I can ignore it, or I can add it to the dictionary. So that should be the word mail. So I'm going to click on mail. It automatically changes it for me. So I'm going to go to the next word and do a right click. And that should be today. So again, that's how the spell check feature works. So I've made a note in here about the collection. I'm going to click accept. And now if I look at the codes on this customer, I actually now see the one called 2018. So if I don't receive the payment and I have to call them again, I'm going to go back into my 2018 collection notes. We like to see the latest information at the top, and finish typing those notes in and then click accept. So it's great for that use. It could be great for, because you can also say where you want these memos to pop up. So you may want it to pop up during sales order entry or sales order invoice entry. Maybe a customer has been told, when we're placing an order with you, we always have to give you a PO number. We only pay by PO, and you have to get a number. So you could type that note in and then have it actually display when you pull that customer up and go in to put in a sales order or an invoice. One of the areas, and I'm going to pull this back up just to show you another field in here, you have where you can add an attachment. Now you can only add 1 attachment per memo, but we use this on the AP side with our vendors when we request a copy of their W-9 form. When we get that, we make an electronic copy and then just actually add it within Sage, so that if for whatever reason during an audit or we need to be able to provide that document, we can actually then just go in and pull it up within Sage and print a copy or show proof of that particular form. So but again, you only can have one memo code, or excuse me, one attachment per memo code. So on our vendors, we have a memo code called W9, and then we can just, if we get an updated form, we can just switch it out. So I'd like to ask if anybody has any questions about the memo codes, and it doesn't look like we have anything right now. So let's see. The other thing that I wanted to talk to you about AR, and this is applicable for accounts payable also, is because this question comes up a lot around the end of the year. And under reports, you know, when you're doing period end processing or you're closing out the year, your auditors may require, you know, a copy of the accounts receivable trial balance, or more than likely, they may request a copy of the aged invoice report. So when you give them a copy of the aged invoice report, they're looking to tie that back to the general ledger. And if they don't tie, then they're going to be coming to you asking, why is there a difference? So I want to explain to you why there could be a difference and how you can kind of prove whether or not everything is okay. The accounts payable and accounts receivable trial balance reports are based upon the posting date. So, you know, your general ledger is based on the posting date that you used. The trial balance is also based on the posting date. So if you think there's an issue, if you run the trial balance in the subsidiary module and then run it against the trial balance in the general ledger, though for the same dates, those two should match. If they don't match, then you do have an issue somewhere, and you need to go and look and see, you know, did we clean up, write off a bunch of old accounts, but we didn't actually do it through the AR module. We just went in and made a journal entry and in the general ledger and didn't clean up things in AR. So that could show that there was a difference. You know, maybe by some strange reason you had some type of an out of balance posting. You know, that would cause a difference. But they should tie together, and you should be able to prove that to your auditors. The aged invoice report, and this isn't as much of an issue in newer versions, but it can be in older versions. The aged invoice report is based on the invoice date. So literally, if you had an invoice that you dated October 31st, but you gave it a GL posting date of November 1st, then the transaction for October is going to show up on your aging report, but it's not going to show up in the GL until the November report. So your invoice date is what the AR and AP invoices are based upon. The trial balance is what is based upon your posting date. So you know, sometimes at the end of the year, people will post to the wrong year or have issues like that. So we should be able to go back and tie them out. The other thing that you can do is you can run these reports out to what I call the end of time, and you could give it a date of like 12/31/2999 on all of your reports, and then they should all tie together, and that kind of proves that it's a date issue versus a data issue. So just kind of wanted to pass that along since we are approaching year end. Let's see. So we've talked about some things that are in AR as well as AP. One thing I wanted to point out to you or make you aware of in accounts payable is that now you have the ability to pay your vendors electronically. So you can set up ACH within accounts payable, and when you select your vendors for payment, it can create that ACH file that you would upload to your bank. And then they would, basically, it's like direct deposit for your employees. They're going to then disperse those funds into your vendors' accounts. You can, it's not an either or. So you can have some vendors that want or require ACH payment, and others that prefer that you actually send them a check. So you can have a mix of whichever you want to do. What generating this file does is some folks use ACH through their bank, but they kind of print dummy checks, and then they get on their bank software, and then they rekey all of that information. What this will do is keep you from having to print those dummy checks. It processes that payment, and then by clicking this button, once you have the setup done, it then creates and saves an ACH file. So then you go out and log into your bank software and you just upload that file. So it's much quicker and easier, and there's less risk of making an error if you're manually keying that information in. The other thing that you can do with this is that it can print a remittance advice to your vendor, and you can use the emailing through Paperless Office and have it email them that remittance advice. So they know that you're cutting that ACH payment on November the 1st, and they also can see what invoices you're paying. So when they're doing the cash receipts on their end, they know how much money went into their bank and what invoices you're paying. So I just wanted to make everyone aware that that is in the current versions. It's probably been there for the last 2 to 3 versions, maybe even 4 versions. So it's not anything that you have to add on to purchase separately. It is a feature that is built into the system. So with that, if anybody has any questions, please feel free to submit those. And there's one more little tip that I wanted to show you in accounts payable, and this is on the invoice payment selection. So there's no right or wrong way to do an invoice payment selection when you're ready to pay your vendors, but I wanted to show you a couple of different ways that you can do it. What a lot of people do is just basically base it on the invoice due date, what that due date is today. They go down and click proceed, and then anything that falls within this category, it selects it for payment. You may be in a situation where you're not going to pay everything that's due today. Maybe you print out an aging report and give it to the CFO, and they tell you which invoices you can pay. Another one may say, okay, you have $10,000 a week, pay what you can. So when you're in that situation, to save yourself a little time, you're still going to pick these fields, but instead of clicking proceed, you're going to go over and click select. And I am probably not going to have anything out here because I think my demo data is 2020. Let me see if I can get a little more information here. There we go. So you can see that these are all of the invoices. You can tell that most of them are past due because I'm in November of 2020. But these are all of my open invoices. So what I can do is, whether I have a list of what I'm allowed to pay or I'm looking for, $10,000 to spend it however I can go through and I can highlight, and then holding my control key down, I can pick certain invoices for payment. At the same time, it is giving me a running total. So if I know that I have $10,000 to spend, I can pick the ones that, whoops, that had a big invoice. So obviously I can't pay that one. I could do a partial payment if I wanted to, but this is pretty close to $10,000. So let's say those are the ones I've decided to pay. I'm going to click OK. And now what I do now is I don't click proceed, or it's going to pick everything else that I didn't select. At this point, I'm ready to actually print or preview my invoice payment selection. So I'm going to just preview that listing, and then it's going to pop up and it's going to show me the invoices that I selected. So it gives me the list, and then obviously, you know, when you do the selection, once you finish, it'll ask if you want to print checks, and I'm going to say no at this point. So let's say that I looked at that list and there was a vendor that I forgot to add. I can go back into my selection, put in the same date range, click on select. This is going to show the ones that I did not select, and if they wanted to make sure this one got paid, I'm going to add it, click OK. I can print my report again, and it will have added that invoice to the payment selection. Again, if you click proceed here, it's going to then pull everything else that's on this list. If you do that by mistake, and it's like, well, shoot, all you do is click clear over here. It's going to say, do you want to clear all of your selections? You're going to say yes. And then if I go back in, everything is there from before I started. So I wanted to show you that little shortcut in the invoice payment selection. Again, people do it various ways. You can also go into the check and electronic payment maintenance and pick in vendor by vendor and invoice by invoice what you want to pay. So that, again, there's no right or wrong way. Some of the ways may save you a little time, some may not. So it's basically whatever you're comfortable with, but just knowing that there are other options there. Okay. Want to briefly talk about the bank rec module. There are a lot of clients that still do bank reconciliation manually for a variety of reasons. Some being, you know, we've always done bank rec manually and we don't trust the system to do it. You know, it could be that you say, well, you know, when I started with company XYZ, the bank rec was just a mess and I never was able to reconcile it, so I just do it manually now because there's just a bunch of bad data in the system. If you find yourself in that situation, it is very easy for us to wipe out the data that's in the bank rec, which doesn't affect any history. It doesn't affect anything at all except just what's in the bank rec. We'll make sure that the integrations are turned on. You would manually key your outstanding deposits and checks, and that would give you a good starting point. So if it's just been such a mess and you haven't had time to deal with it, we can certainly help you with that. And training you on how to use the bank reconciliation module is, using it itself is probably 30 minutes. It's very easy. If you think about it, it's really like doing it manually, where you have a list of checks and you have a list of outstanding deposits or adjustments, and then you're just checking off what has cleared and keeping track of that. So just kind of keep that in the back of your mind, that if it is something that you want to do in the future and utilize, we would be more than glad to help you with that. So I'm going to share some additional information with you about year-end in just a minute, but I wanted to remind everyone of a few things. Any of the webinars that we conduct on a monthly basis are recorded, and those recordings are placed out on our website. So, and I'll show you in a few minutes where you can find those. But feel free to, it's free. You don't have to sign up to view them or register to view them. So feel free to share it with any other team members or use it as a refresher for yourself. Once we get through the year-end webinars in December, we will not have a webinar in January, but we will resume monthly webinars in February. And in 2019, we are hoping to, in addition to having the monthly tips and tricks webinar, branch out and offer more third-party or add-on webinars and trying to tie those with the monthly tips and tricks. So an example might be in March, we may have a webinar, tips and tricks webinar, just focusing on accounts payable. And then the next week, we may have a webinar related to document management and automating your AP. So we'll kind of link those together. So we do hope to offer more of these free webinars to you in 2019. So what I'm going to do is just look and see if there's any questions. And it doesn't, whoops, let's see, hold on just a second. Where can we get additional AP questions answered, specifically applying open invoices? Let me see if I can make that bigger. Applying open credits to AP invoices and clearing out these entries out of the AP check run edits. Because that requires a little more, a few more questions to ask for Leslie, let me follow up with you after this presentation. It may be something that needs to be forwarded to our support department, but I want to make sure I understand a little bit more about what you're needing, and I may be able to answer that question for you. So if you don't mind, Leslie, I will get with you after the presentation and be able to answer that question for you. So let me make a little note here. Okay, thank you. And again, if any questions come up between now and the end, we will, okay, there we go. Okay. So what we're going to do now is, because we're getting so close to year end, I wanted to share a little bit of some additional information. And I'll go through this very quickly. Okay, just wanted to make sure I was on the right screen. Talking about year end, mostly what I'm referring to is if you're having to process 1099s with your accounts payable, or if you're using the payroll module within Sage 100 and you're processing W-2s. And also for those folks that have inventory management, if you know that you typically do physical counts at the end of the year, if this is your first physical count, I strongly suggest that you get in touch with our tech support team so that we can make sure that we have someone available. We don't want you to get into a crunch that you have to get in your count done a certain day and you call, because we have a really high call volume and can have a longer lead time and when we get back with you at year end. And I'm sorry, this presentation actually has is auto running, so let me see if I can go through this without it changing on me. So one of the things that I wanted to talk to you for everyone, is that tomorrow morning you all should receive, any of our end users should receive an email that gives a list of the upcoming webinars and how to request an appointment for year-end assistance. It's the same as we do every year, but if you're new to Oasis, you will be getting that information. We are offering basically 4 webinars in early December, where we will be providing information on how to print your forms, what type of forms you need, and the email that you receive tomorrow will also have a link where you can register for one of those free sessions. For year end, if you use payroll and you are subject to the Affordable Care Act filing, you can go to oasisky.com, click on Learn Videos and then Sage See Videos, and you will find these 5 ACA videos that we have listed. They are from 2015, but the information is still applicable. So it will give you a good overview of what is required for the ACA. For those I mentioned earlier that you could go back and view any of our prior webinars. If you go to the same site here, then all of the prior tips and tricks webinar recordings are listed there as well. So anything that we've recorded related to Sage or other Sage products, you can see in that area. So something that you want to start thinking about is when you need to start thinking about an upgrade. As you'll see here, version 2015, which is also 5.2, was no longer supported as of September 30th. This means it was no longer supported by Sage. Oasis will continue to support you. The biggest issue would be is if you use payroll or print 1099s, that if there is a change, we may or may not be able to make that change because you're on an unsupported version, but we are not aware of any major changes at this point. If you're on payroll, it's a little too late to get you upgraded before the end of the year, but it's not too soon to request an upgrade when we start early next year. So if you want to request an upgrade, just send me an email with Upgrade 2018 in the subject line, and then I will send you information with the request form and also the supported platform matrix that will tell you what your server, your OS, and your workstations, what those minimum requirements are, so that you can make sure that your hardware is compatible before we actually schedule an upgrade. So again, you know, if you're concerned that you might be having an issue, if you're not sure what version you're on, again, this is showing you if you're on 5.2 or prior, then you are on a retired version. If you have questions or you're worried about what does that mean for you, feel free to email me, and I will be glad to take a look at the modules that you use and give you options on what we can do for you and how we can get past that and then plan on moving forward. The other thing is if you have custom modifications from Oasis or other third parties, that does increase the lead time on getting an upgrade completed. So we can get started on working on everything with the exception of the actual upgrade. And but we can get that planned so that as soon as we get through year end, which is typically the 2nd to 3rd week in February, that we're ready to go and already have folks on the schedule to do the upgrades. So with that, that concludes my presentation for today. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. If you do have any additional questions after the presentation, feel free to email me at pam@oasisky.com. And it doesn't look like we have any additional questions at this point, so I will just remind Leslie that I will follow up with her after the presentation. So we'll go ahead and end, and I'd like to wish everyone a happy and safe travels for their Thanksgiving holiday. So thank you all very much. Bye-bye.